Hello students, this is Mr. Hernandez and we are going to be modeling in Fusion today. This is going to be hopefully the first of many Fusion 360 videos that are teaching you guys how to use different tools within Fusion 360. And today we're going to make a mechanism that can move, and I'm actually going to show you what we're going to make here before we finish it so you can see what the end product looks like. And you can see if I drag this, okay, it's not working. Let's close this. I think that's the problem. If I drag this bar here, I can, what is going on? Here we go. I drag this bar. We see we have a mechanism where continuous rotational motion on this arm here, where my cursor is, creates a walking effect at the end of this arm over here. And the orientation you guys will be using this in for your robot is actually like this, where this is going to represent some sort of waving motion of an arm on a robot. So that's the end goal. We're going to go ahead and make that, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it right now. So I'm going to start a new design. So when you open up Fusion 360 for the first time, this is exactly what it's going to look like. We do have Fusion 360 on the computers at school. However, if you want to use it, you have to make your own educational account, and you will do that at Autodesk at their website. So as you can see here, I'm on my home computer. I'm using an educational license licensed to me, not to the school, and I'm signed in on that as Tyler Hernandez. So you'll have to use your school email address to create that license. So this is what it looks like when you first open it. It's just this blank workspace, and we want to start making things and adding them to the screen. Before we get started, I just want to point out that there are various tools up here. We'll be using some of them, but not all of them, as well as a data panel, which shows things that I've actually already made in the past. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Oops, other direction. There we go. There's this explorer here that's going to show the things as we start making them. They'll start popping up on this list. There's a timeline down here, and I have no idea how to use it, so don't ask me. And there is this cube in the corner, and this cube is pretty cool. I highly recommend you use Fusion 360 on a desktop computer with a mouse. A mouse makes it much easier to use. However, if you're going to be using it on a laptop, you're going to need to use this cube a lot. And this cube is it shows the view that we're currently using, and we're currently viewing this corner of the screen. If I click on the front face, it'll orient to the front face. And I can click on an edge of the cube to tilt. I can rotate, I can click on the right side, or I can look at the bottom if I want to. Or I can click on the cube and I can drag to any position that I want. So I'm going to go back to the initial position it showed. This is pretty useful, but since I'm going to be using a mouse, I'm not really going to use this cube very much, if at all, and I'll explain the keys and the commands that I'm using as I do them. So let's start drawing some objects and making our thing. First thing we're going to want to do is start a new sketch. So in order to do that, I'm going to select this first tool here, create sketch, and this is where we're going to go to draw things. So I'm going to click it with the left click, and then this pops up and I have to select a plane to work in. I always select this one. It doesn't really matter which plane you use, so I'm just going to click this plane here. It's going to rotate to show that plane, and now we can start drawing. And you see we've got brand new tools up here. So first thing I'm going to do, in full transparency, this is not a linkage that I came up with. It's actually one I found online, so I'm going to add the dimensions right now. So I'm going to go to Insert, Canvas, and I'm going to select the plane that we're working in. I'm actually going to make a background picture that has all of the measurements that I need. So I'm going to select this plane, and it shows that I have one face selected. And then I'm going to go here next to Image, click, and select the walking mechanism image that I have already downloaded onto my computer. And it'll show up on my screen here, and I can make it bigger if I want to, and I'm actually going to move it over here so it's out of the way, and I can come over there periodically to look at it and see what size pieces I need to be using. So I'm gonna hit OK, and now I've got this picture here that shows all of the dimensions I need for my sketch. Now let's go over how to use the mouse real quick. You can obviously move the cursor, but just by dragging the mouse around, and you can click on things with the left and the right click. If I want to zoom, I can use the scroll wheel on the mouse. So here I am zooming in, here I am zooming out. I can also press the scroll wheel in, and then if I move my mouse while holding the scroll wheel in, I can drag to other areas of the workspace, which is really useful. And the final thing we can do is if we hold Shift, press the mouse key or the scroll wheel in, and then drag, we can pan or rotate and look at things from different angles, which is really helpful, and we end up needing to use that tool a lot. So I just wanted to show you that. I'm going to hide that little window there, and we're going to start drawing. So if we look at this mechanism, these blue lines here, this little blue triangle, is showing where the fixed points are of our sketch. So all of these black pieces move, and these blue ones right here don't move at all. So I'm going to sketch those first, make our, and this is kind of like where we mount our mechanism. So I'm going to make that mounting piece, and then I'm going to make all of these arms and attach them to the mounting piece. So the first order of business is the mounting piece, and the dimensions for it are right here. So I'm going to start by making a triangle here with a side that's 61.45 millimeters and then a width of 266.16 millimeters. Now, that's a lot bigger than I actually want to make anything. So I'm going to make everything a factor of 10 smaller. So instead of 61 millimeters, I'm going to do 6.1 millimeters. So I have my dimensions over here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do, select the line tool because I want to start drawing a triangle. There is a triangle, or I'm sorry, that's not a triangle tool. There might be a triangle tool in here. I don't see one, so I'm just going to use the line tool. Clicks anywhere on the screen with the left click. So I'll just click over here and drag down and click again to finish drawing my line. I'm going to drag over here, draw another line, and then drag back to the initial point, and now I've made a triangle. And these are all random dimensions right now. I didn't actually make anything the correct size, but I need to do that. So before I do though, I'm going to draw the bottom half of the triangle. So I'm going to click right here. I still have my line tool selected. So I'm going to left click, drag down, click, and then I'm going to go over to the vertex over here and click again. Now, if you see what just happened, if I just click any point in space, it'll put the thing there. But Fusion, it tries to anticipate what you're trying to do. So if I get near this vertex here, it's actually going to snap to it. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but it's going to snap because it thinks that I want to put it right there, which I do. So it is pretty intuitive in that sense that if you're trying to get to some sort of point of interest, it can pretty well identify what point you're looking for. So I am going to select there. And I have this triangle, but I haven't defined any of the dimensions yet, which I need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Escape to deselect the line tool. And then since I want to define the dimensions, I'm going to select this Sketch Dimension tool. And what that allows me to do is start defining the length and angles of things. So the first thing I want to define, this side right here needs to be 6.145 millimeters. So I'm going to click on that line, drag over, and it shows me the length of that it currently is. And then I'm going to click and then type in the new length that I want. So I want 6.145 millimeters. Press enter, and it will shrink the whole thing to fit that dimension. Now, this piece, or this base of this top triangle needs to be 26.616 millimeters. So I still have the sketch dimension selected. I'm going to click on that line, drag up here, and I'm going to make this 26.616 millimeters, and there we go. Finally, I need 130 millimeters on this piece right here. Still having the sketch dimension tool selected, I'm going to go here, drag it over, and this needs to be 13 millimeters. Now, something's going to happen as soon as I do this, and as I hit enter, my triangle is pretty much exactly what I wanted it to be. And if I look here, I see this is a little 13-degree angle. This is a 26-degree angle, meaning this total angle here is 39 degrees. So I can check to see if this came out correctly by checking that angle. And the way I do that is using the sketch dimension tool. I'm going to click the two lines that I want to measure the angle between, and it will intuitively know that I'm trying to measure an angle. So I'll click on the first line, click on the second line, and you can see I do in fact have a 39-degree angle. So this triangle here is exactly what we were trying to make. This is an exact replica of this, just at a different size. And these are the corners of this triangle, represent where our, wait a second. Huh, that looks a little weird there. I'm not sure what's going on. No, we're good. Okay. The corners of this triangle represent where we want our pivot points to be. So I actually am not interested in this triangle. I'm just interested in the corners. So what I can do is hit escape, so I'm not using the sketch dimension tool anymore. Make sure that I'm using the select tool now. I'm going to highlight the triangle, right click, and then click where it says normal / construction. What that means is if I have a line on the screen that is either a normal line or a construction line, it'll turn into the other thing. A normal line is just a regular line. It's a line that I intend to use for the part that I'm making. A construction line is kind of like a reference line where I'm using it for my own use, but I don't intend for it to show up in my final piece. None of these lines here I intend to show up in my final piece. So I'm going to turn them all into construction lines. Okay. Now I do want a pivot point at each of the corners. So I'm actually going to zoom in on a corner here, and I'm going to make a circle there. So I'm going to use the center diameter circle tool. And what that means is if I click somewhere and then drag, where I clicked is where the center of a circle will be, and I can drag to determine the diameter of that circle. I'm going to hit escape because I don't want to draw it here. I actually want to draw it at this vertex, and as I get close you'll see that it snaps to the vertex there, which it just did. So I'll click and drag, and I'm going to go ahead and make a 2 millimeter circle. To do that, I'm just going to type 2 and press enter. Now I've got a 2 millimeter circle right there on the screen. And I'm going to do the same thing in each corner. Now, since I want to perform the same operation, there's actually a shortcut I can use. If I right click my mouse, this menu pops up of some commonly used tools. And what I currently want to do is use the same thing I just did. When you right click, whatever shows up here is going to be the last thing you did. So because the last thing I did was draw a circle, drawing the circle is going to show up as the tool here. So I'm going to select that tool, click on the vertex, drag, and define it again as 2 millimeters and press enter. Okay, so I've got 2 vertexes. Now I'm going to make my third vertex. I'm going to right click, use my diameter circle tool, click on the vertex, drag, type in 2, and press enter. Now I've placed a 2 millimeter circle at each vertex of this construction triangle, and these are where our pivot points are going to be for our linkage. Now, in order to make this, in order to model this as some sort of object that I'm going to fix all these in place, I am going to attach these with straight lines, and I want to make it look nice. So I'm going to make the line on this edge go down to this edge, here to here, and so in order to do that, I'm going to use my line tool, and just to exaggerate how this works, I'm just going to click a random point on the circle here. So if I were to connect this here, it's going to look really nasty, right? I'll show you how we fix that. So I'm going to put the other end of my line on this circle. Now, if you notice, If I click on a random spot on the circle, it just shows up as an X. But at a certain spot, it shows up as this circle with a line above it. That means tangent, or it's going to make the line tangent to the circle, which is exactly what I want. I want it to touch at exactly one spot. So I'm going to click where I see the tangent signal or symbol show up. What that means is no matter what I do, it's going to make sure this line is tangent to this circle. So I'm going to click right there, and I've drawn my line, but it's not tangent to this circle, right? We want that point there to be somewhere like this. So I need to constrain this or force it to be somewhere where I want it to be, or force it to do something I want it to do. Since it's already tangent down here, the way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to force it to be parallel to this construction line, which will make it be tangent right there. In order to do that, I'm going to go up to this section that says constraints, and the one with the two lines here is a parallel line constraint. So I'll click on that, and then I select two lines that I want to be parallel. So I'll select the line on my triangle, and then this not parallel line right here, and it will make it parallel. So it snapped it over here so that it's parallel, and now I've got a nice looking connection here. I'm going to do the same thing on both of these sides, so let me do that real quick. Line tool, click here, look for the tangent. Line tool, click here, look for the tangent. Then I'm going to go to my parallel constraint and make these two parallel, and then make these two parallel. And it just moved everything, so we've got these nice smooth points. Okay, so this is the base plate on which we're going to make our entire linkage. This is this piece back here. So what I'm going to do now is, this piece is almost done. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch, and you can see the construction lines, but really the lines we're interested in are these blue lines that turn black when we hover over the piece. But if we pan around, it doesn't really occupy any space. It's just a design that hasn't been turned into a part yet. We want to make it a physical part. So in order to do that, we're going to click on it, and it'll typically click on or select whatever region that you just clicked on. So sometimes if I used multiple things, I need to select them all. You could drag and select everything, or you can select, hold shift, and click on the other areas that you want to click on, or that you want to select, which is typically what I do. So I can be pretty precise in what I'm selecting and what I'm ignoring, because sometimes you'll want to ignore something. So I've selected all of these pieces, and now I want to make them go from a design into a physical object. And to do that, I'm going to extrude or make this thing have some thickness. In order to do that, I type in E, and this extrude option shows up. Then I see here I have selected the thickness that I want to extrude, or the distance. I'm going to extrude this piece 1 millimeter and type in enter. And now you can see our part is now this solid body here with a thickness of 1 millimeter. So we made our first part in Fusion 360 just now. Okay, but this part's not quite done. Remember, I said our axles were going to be in the corners of this triangle here, but now we can't see those. So I actually want to add the axles so I know where my mounting points are. In order to do that, I need to go back to the sketch. So I'm going to go back to create sketch, and just like before, you have to select a plane, but we now have the option to select the plane of the workpiece itself. So I'm going to select this plane, and it's going to orient facing this plane, and now I can work directly on top of it. All right, I'm going to zoom into one of the corners, and if you see, this curve was made by that circle, and this point in the circle, the center of the circle, was the point where we want our axle. So I want to make another circle here. I'm going to use my circle tool, and if I get close to that point, it's actually going to snap to that point for me. Fusion's very intuitive like that. So I'm going to click on this point where I see the circle icon, meaning I'm at the center of this existing circle. and I'm going to drag, and I want to make this circle 1 millimeter. So it's going to be inside the other one, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing at each corner. So I'm going to go down to this corner, select the circles tool, find the center of my circle, drag, type in 1, and enter. Now, if you remember our shortcuts, I can right click, go up to repeat that command, find my circle, and type in 1 millimeter, just like that. These are going to be the axles upon which these pieces are allowed to rotate. So I am just about ready to finish this part. I'm going to finish the sketch. And then now, this is where you don't want to select everything. You just want to select the circles that I just made. So I'm going to click on the circle, hold shift, click on the other circle, and hold shift and click on the last circle. Now I'm just selecting these 3 circles in the corner. I'm going to press E, and I'm going to extrude these out. Let's do 0.5 millimeters. And now if we rotate, we see that these are little posts on this plate here. And this is where we're going to attach our bars that are going to do all the motion. Okay, so this piece is done. Typically, you might do a little bit of post-processing or cleaning up to make this nice. When you've got a joint like this, that is a 90-degree joint where there's material sticking out, this point would be something we call a stress riser, or stress in the material is going to build up at this point, and this is going to be a point of failure. So you can actually select this point and do what's called a fillet, or round this point over so that it's not as sharp of a corner. So if I press fillet, and I select a fillet radius, in this case I'll do 0.1 millimeters, it's going to give that sharp edge a 0.1 millimeter curve to it. So it's not as sharp, it's not going to be a stress riser anymore. What just happened? There we go. So that's a nice thing to do typically when you're making a product. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I can actually do multiple at a time by selecting both of these at the same time, using my fillet key, and then again doing the 0.1 millimeter fillet there. Also, if this is a piece made out of metal or something like you guys will be doing on your robot, these edges are going to be sharp. So you're going to want to select those edges. And I can just select every edge by highlighting the whole thing and fillet every edge if I want to. And I'll give everything a nice 0.1 millimeter round over so it's not as sharp. Okay, this is a finished part now. And we're going to build the rest of our mechanism attached to this. So let's start making now all of these bars that go on our linkage. If we look at the picture here, I have a 110 millimeter bar, a 130 millimeter bar, a 182 millimeter bar, and then the other ones are actually a little different. Here we can see there's 288 millimeters between this pivot and this pivot. And there's 222 millimeters between this pivot and this pivot. But you can see that the angle between these two is specified. These are not separate bars. These are the same bar that's got a bend in the middle. It's not a straight 180 degrees, it's 170 degrees, or it has a 10-degree bend to it. So we're gonna have to make a piece with a 10-degree bend. Same thing here, 265, 490 with a 160-degree angle or a 20-degree bend. So I'm gonna make my short straight ones first, and then I'll make the bent ones after. Okay, so if I want to make new parts, just like before, we're going to go to Create Sketch. I'm going to select the plane of our piece here, and then we can zoom in and start drawing. Now, in order to make these bars, I could make a circle, you know, give it a diameter, let's say 2 meters, or 2 millimeters. Make another circle over here, give it a diameter of 2, and then I could connect it with straight lines if I wanted to. And then I could make these lines parallel to make sure that they're nice and straight. And then I could set the distance between their centers as 11 for my first bar. I could do that, and that would be fine, but that's a lot of work. In fact, there's a much faster way to do this in Fusion. So I'm going to undo with my little undo button here, get rid of this piece I just made. And then in the Create tool, I'm actually going to select this drop-down menu and go down to Slot. And a slot is going to make an oval, which is exactly what we're trying to make here. So I'm going to select the center-to-center slot. Then I can click, drag. The first bar I want to make is 11 millimeters long, so I'll type in 11 millimeters. If I click again, I can drag and make the thickness of my slot. And I'm going to make my slots 1 millimeter. Typically, you would use this to cut a slot into a piece of material, but you can just as easily use it to make a piece as well. So I have an 11 millimeter, and that's going to be this bar here. I now need a 13 and an 18.2, so let's do those. I'm going to right click, repeat, click, drag. This needs to be 13, so I'll type in 13. Click, drag, and I want it 1 millimeter thick. And then right click, repeat, boom, boom, 18.2, click, drag, and I want a 1 millimeter thickness. So those are those three nice short straight bars. This bar, and this bar. Now I need to make the curved bars. And the way I'm going to do that is actually with tools we've already seen. I'm going to make a slot, I'm going to attach another slot to it, and then I'm going to use the sketch dimension tool to make the angle between them 170 degrees. So let's do that. I'm going to right click, repeat, make the first slot, which is 288, you can see here. So I'll do 28.8, click and drag and make it 1 millimeter thick as before and press enter. Now I'm going to repeat that command, but when I start, I'm going to start at the center of one of the ends of the slot that I just made. So I'm going to start at the middle of the circle here, so I'm going to click at that center point right there. That's where I'm going to start my next piece, and this one needs to be 22.2, as I can see from the diagram here. I'm just going to click a random angle to show how we can change it. I'm going to set it to 1 millimeter thick, hit enter. Sometimes you'll notice it just lagged a little bit. It could be because I have this other one open, so I'm actually going to close it. No, let's not save it. And but as you start adding more and more pieces with more and more details, this software will start requiring more processing power from your computer, specifically the graphics card. So if you're trying to do this on a laptop, you may struggle with it being slow to respond. But if you're using a desktop computer with a good graphics card like we have in the CAD lab, you should have no problems. The graphics cards in the CAD lab are a little bit better than mine, so that's why I'm having a little bit of issues here. Okay, so this is a random angle, and I want to define this angle as 170 degrees. So what I'm going to do is go back to my sketch dimension tool, click on the center line of one of these slots, click on the center line of the other slot, and now I'm defining the angle between them, which I just said I want to be 170 degrees. So 170, press enter, and now it's at the correct angle. Alright, I'll make my last piece, 265, 490 with a 160 degree angle between them. Let's do it. Create, slot center to center, click and drag. This needs to be 26.5, click, drag 1 millimeter, enter. Now I'm going to repeat that command, selecting this point as my starting point. This is going to be 49, click, drag 1, enter. Sketch dimension tool, define the angle between them as 160 degrees, and done. Now I've made all of the parts, or at least sketched all of the parts that we need to make this linkage. So our sketch is done. I'm going to finish sketch, and now you can see all of these designs, but again, they don't take any space up in the real world or even in this virtual world. They're just flat floating sketches, and I want to make them take up space. So I'm going to highlight all of them, press E to extrude, and I'm going to extrude them 0.5 millimeters. And then press enter. And then now we've got physical pieces, which you can see here. Okay. Again, these have sharp edges, and you don't want your pieces to have sharp edges, so I am going to fillet them with a 0.1 millimeter radius, just to be good practice when you're designing things. You do want to chamfer or fillet your corners so that they're not sharp. And now I've got nice round edges everywhere on these bars. Okay. Now, if I click on a piece, I can't move anything. And I want to start snapping these together. In Fusion, when you create a body, and these are all bodies, you cannot move them. However, components can be moved, so I want to turn these all into components. The way I do that is going over here to bodies, and if I select this arrow here, you can see I have 6 bodies on my canvas. Now I want to turn these all into components, so I'm going to right click on the bodies category and then select create components from bodies. That will turn all of my bodies into its own individual component. And you can see I can drag these around now. I can drag any of these around. Now this one is our anchor point. We actually don't want that to move. So I'm going to put it somewhere. Let's put it right here. And then you can see if I click on it, component 1 has these little dashed marks under it, meaning I'm selecting component 1. If I deselect it, I can press component 1 and it will select this component. So this is component 1. And I don't want this to be able to move, so I'm actually going to right click here and select ground. When this dialog box comes up, I always select capture position. I haven't had any issues with that. So now if I click and try and drag this piece around, it doesn't move, but I can still click and drag the other ones. That's because this is grounded and it's now going to be our reference for everything. So let's start putting some pieces onto it. Oh no, it doesn't work. Actually, what we need to do is start an assembly, or start assembling our thing. So I'm going to go up here to this assemble option, click the drop down menu, and I'm going to make a joint. Again, hit capture position. Now when you do that, the piece that we grounded, you cannot click this. You can't select this. That's because when you're making a joint, the first piece that you select cannot be a grounded piece. The first piece you select is going to go attached to the second piece. So I can't move this, so I have to select something else. If I look at my design here, this little 11 millimeter arm goes on this far right vertex of the triangle. So it's going to go right here. So I'm going to select my small piece, and I'm actually going to select, if I zoom in, I can select anywhere on here, and I can actually snap to this point of interest, which is the center of the circle on the end. So I'm going to select that point, and I'm going to select the tip of this post that we made earlier, and it's actually going to move that piece and put it on that post. And when you do this, it's actually going to show as a rigid joint at first, meaning they're fixed together. It's almost like they're glued together and they can't move. But we want this to be able to rotate. So you're going to go to this option over here that says rigid and select revolute. And now it's a moving joint. If I press OK, and then I can zoom out, I can actually select this piece now and rotate it around that joint that we just made. So we need to do this for all of our joints now. So I'm just going to continue on. Oh no, I think I selected the wrong bar. This bar seems to be longer than this bar. I did select the wrong bar, so I'm going to undo what I just did. I'm going to go back until that joint is no longer here. Make sure, okay, I did have the right bar selected, so I'm going to redo what I just did. Okay, it's gone. I'll just do it again real quick. I'm going to go to assemble, joint, capture position, Go right here and right here. Snap those together. Revolute joint. Okay. All right, we're good. Now the other short bar, the 13 millimeter, is going to go right here. So let's attach that right here. I'm going to go to Assemble, Joint, Capture Position, select this, and snap those together and press OK. Now this one can move, and this one can move, and this still cannot. This bar attaches right here, so let's go ahead and do that. Assemble, Joint, Capture, click there. Oops, I must have accidentally clicked something. Let's do that again. Assemble, Joint, Capture, select there and there. Enter, and now all of our pieces are currently attached and able to move, except for these long bent ones. So let's look at our picture real quick. First of all, the really long one is the one that goes on the end over here. So this one is going to be our little foot at the very end. The one that connects these two bars, however, is the other one. So that is this bar. And we can see that there's a long section and a short section. And our long section, this part right here, is actually supposed to connect to here and here, with this end going right there. So let's do that. I'm going to go to Assemble, Joint, Capture Position. I'm going to select the end there, and I'm going to select the end right there. And that's going to stick that on the other end of my joint here. Okay, now some interesting things happen. I can move this, and it moves both of these joints now because they're connected, which is pretty neat. Or I can just move this one and rotate it kind of rigidly. Now this and this are supposed to be connected right here. Let me zoom in real quick and show you what we need to consider when we do this. First of all, let me rotate this so that they're closer. Okay. So if I zoom in here, if I try to attach this face to this face, Fusion is going to try and make the side of the part that I selected touch the side of the part that I selected. Meaning it's going to try and flip this bar over and make this side touch right here. But it's already attached to this end. If I try and do that, let's try it right now. Boom, boom, and hit OK. You're going to see that we have a warning here. Because these parts, there's no way we can make these faces touch each other. But if we zoom in here, and I'm actually going to rotate, you'll see that what we really want is the back side of this joint to be touching the front side of this bar here. So when we make our joints, we have to be mindful of which side we're selecting. So I'm going to select the back side of this elbow here, select this point there, say OK. Oh, I actually need to undo the failed joint first. Okay, let's do that again. So Assemble, Joint, Capture Position. This needs to go right there. If I hit OK, now I can join those pieces with no error messages. And these are all linked together now. So if I move this piece, you can see we're starting to get some interesting motion going on. So let's complete this design with our last bar here. But before we do that, I'm again going to drag these two pieces together to illustrate what we need to consider here. So I think I'm just trying to get it to where these points are near each other. There we go. That's really close. Okay, let's zoom in here. If I rotate to the side, you will see that these are not in the same plane, or one is at a different level than the other. If I wanted to attach a piece, let's say to these two faces, they're not perfectly in line. That piece would have to bend in order to make those joints. And Fusion doesn't like that. It's not going to bend a piece to fit. We have to to somehow make this right. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to make this piece a little bit bigger. And to do that, I'm going to select the end back here and extrude it back so that it is in line here. And let me show you what I mean. Let me rotate my camera. I'm going to go to Create Sketch, select, I'm lagging a little bit, select this face, capture position, and oops, let me zoom out a little bit. What is going on here? And what I want to do is pull it back. So I want to put a circle on the end there and extrude it backwards. So I'm going to zoom in here, use my circle tool, find the middle of this circle, looking for this circle icon there, drag it. I'm going to make 1 millimeter and hit enter and finish sketch. Now I can select this area, and I'll go ahead and select this overhang, why not? Hit E to extrude, and if you remember before, our pieces were 0.5 millimeters thick. So I need this to be extruded 0.5 millimeters, or not, or 0.5 millimeters. Okay. So now I've moved this back, and it's now in line here, and I can add that piece now. I don't really like the look of this joint. I'm actually going to undo that. And instead of extruding the whole part, I'm just going to extrude this part here. Again, 0.5 millimeters. And then I'm going to select it and select this point here. And I'm going to fillet all of these edges here. 0.1 millimeters again. There we go. That looks better. Okay. Let's see, where were we? Oh, and I even want to fillet let's just fillet the whole thing. 0.1 millimeters, enter. Or whatever, cancel. It doesn't want to fillet it again because it's already been filleted. That's fine. All right, now we need to add our final piece to the back of these two pieces here. So let's figure out the orientation we need first. If you look back at our drawing, the long leg sticks down. The shorter piece connects the two. So I actually need this side of this end to attach to the back right here. So I'm going to make my joint, capture position, select, what did I do? Select right there. Go back to my piece, rotate around, and select right there. And then I'll snap those pieces together and type OK. Now, Fusion just did a weird thing. I don't know why it does this, but it tries to figure out for itself the best way to put the piece that you just put in. And sometimes it just gets it way wrong. So you have to drag and correct it occasionally, but that's not a big deal. So I'm just repositioning things closer to where they're going to need to go. And now I can clearly see my final joint. I need to join this face here, the corner right there. So I'm going to assemble, joint, capture position, select this face here and this face here, type in OK, and we are done. Now, if I move my first bar again, you can see we have that cool walking motion that we saw earlier. One other fun little tool that I'd like to show you guys is we can actually automate this so it runs by itself. In order to do that, we want to add motion or create a motion study. So I'm going to go to Assemble, select Motion Study, and this window pops up, which I'll explain right now. We need to select a joint to animate, and I want to animate this joint. This is where our motor is going to be, which makes this bar here, or this arm, rotate. So since this is where our motor is going to be, I'm going to select this joint, and now it shows up on our, oh, before I do this actually, I want to initialize this angle to something nice. So I'm going to click on the angle and let's initialize it to, I don't know, 0 degrees. Cool. And then let's see, if I rotate this way, that's the negative direction. If I rotate this way, it's the positive direction. Okay. All right, actually, let's set this to something crazy like 180 degrees. Perfect. Now, let's go to Assemble, Motion Study, select our joint, and now it shows up here. This bar is kind of like a timeline, and we can add points and where we want this joint to be at those points. Let me show you. If I hover over the line, you see next to my cursor a number like 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10, blah, blah, blah. You can think of these kind of like seconds. So I'm going to select 10 or the 10-second mark, and it's showing where the angle currently is. And let's say I actually want the angle to be 90 at that point. So I can press 90. Actually, let's do 45. And if I click elsewhere, it'll show it moving to 45 degrees. So it went from 80 to 45 degrees. That's a huge jump. Let's cancel. Let's try that again. Assemble, Motion Study. Select our joint. Let's go to 10 seconds. It was at 180. Let's subtract 45 or go to 135 degrees. Click somewhere else. And you can see it shows us that point that we just defined. Let's keep going in 10-second intervals. Let's rotate another 45 degrees. So I'm going to go to the 20-second mark and make this 90 degrees. I'm going to go to the 30-second mark, make this 45 degrees. 40 seconds will be 0 degrees. 50 seconds will be negative 45 degrees. 60 will be negative 90. 70 will be negative 135. And finally, 80 will be minus 180. So I've completed an entire revolution. Now, the only thing left to do is run it. And I can set the speed, so I can make it go really fast and hit run. And you didn't even see it happen. If I slow it down and hit play, it'll go really quickly. So I like to slow this down all the way. And then I actually like to loop it. So I'm going to click this little loop with an arrow here, and that's going to loop the motion. And then all you got to do is hit play, and we have now motorized our leg. And we can see the motion that it's going to use, or the motion it's going to have when it's motorized in real life. So you can use this sort of linkage to make a walking robot, or more interestingly, for you guys, is we can rotate it like this so that we kind of get a robot that waves just like you wanted to do on the Idealab robot. So I would, if I were you, I would take this design, figure out the size you want to use, scale all of these dimensions to match that size, and then make tool paths and start cutting these out of stuff. So I will show you guys how to do that at school if you would like. If you have any questions about anything I did, or maybe any of the other tools in Fusion 360, please feel free to find me at school. I would love to help you. Go ahead and rewatch this video if I went a little too fast. I recommend you try and follow along and create this yourself, because the best way to learn how to do any sort of CAD software is to do it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you at school.